welcome to another video lecture for Mr. Moser's 8th grade American history class. Today we'll be looking at creating the Constitution, the third issue, which is how will we elect the U.S. President. The textbook readings for this particular video lecture comes to us from Chapter 5, Section 3, Creating the Constitution, pages 163 to 168, and Chapter 6, Section 1, Understanding the Constitution, pages 182 to 186. Why were some of the delegates concerned with Congress picking the president? Why were some of the delegates concerned with the people voting for president? What is the Electoral College? How many electoral votes does Nebraska have? How does this compare to California? Why the difference? How many electoral votes does a presidential candidate have to win today to win the presidency? And then what are the pros and cons to the Electoral College? So a question to think about is, do the American people directly vote for the U.S. president? Think about that for just a second. How did you answer? Did you say yes? Did you say no? Were you like, I don't know? Well, the election of the U.S. president is kind of a confusing part to our Constitution. The reason for this is that when the Constitution was being written in 1787, not too many people really knew what the office of the president was going to kind of look like. They'd put together a job description of what the role of the president, but they had never seen anyone like this before. So they weren't quite sure exactly how this was all going to play out. So they had some different ideas of what might be the best way to elect a president. One idea that was floated out at the convention was to have the members of the new National Congress vote for the president. But some were kind of not so keen on that idea because they were worried that the new president would be loyal to Congress, that because Congress helped that person get elected, they would have kind of that president in their back pocket. They can tell the president what to do and kind of control the president. And they didn't want that. They wanted to have a separation between Congress and the president. And then some people thought, well, maybe we'll have the people in the states directly vote for president. But the challenge of the time period, though, was that news tended to travel only as fast as a galloping horse, which meant that news traveled slow. And some of the delegates were a little bit concerned that there would never really be a national candidate. People would just vote for the candidates from their individual states. So the New York candidate would receive the New York votes, but probably wouldn't receive a lot of votes from some of the southern states. A Virginian candidate might receive some Virginia votes and maybe some southern state votes, but probably not too many from Massachusetts. So they were a little bit worried about having a national election and having a person run on a national campaign. Finally, others came up with an idea of creating a special group of electors that would be decided by each of the individual states, who could kind of look beyond their own state interest and make a decision for president on who they think would be the best possible option. The system they come up with here is called the Electoral College. The Electoral College is a special body of delegates chosen by the states who would choose the president. These are actual people known as electors, and they're chosen by the individual states. So, for example, Nebraska has a congressional delegation of 5. We have 3 that go to the House of Representatives and 2 that go to the U.S. Senate. So, therefore, Nebraska gets 5 electors. California, that has 53 congressional districts and 2 senators, gives a total congressional membership in the House and the Senate of 55. So therefore, California gets 55 electors. The idea here is that the states that have greater population should have a little bit more influence on who becomes the U.S. president. And so we call this the Electoral College. A lot of times we'll talk about red states versus blue states, and what they're talking about in presidential politics are the states that tend to vote more Democrat, typically are blue states, and the states that typically vote for a Republican for president are referred to as red states. The last time we had a presidential election was in 2012 between Barack Obama, who was a Democrat, and Mitt Romney, who was a Republican. You can see here on the map of the United States, all the states that are in red are states where the majority of citizens of those states voted for Mitt Romney over Barack Obama. So if we add up all the electoral votes for all these states in red, it gives Mitt Romney a number of 206 electoral votes. If I look at all the states that are highlighted in blue here, those are states where the majority of citizens of those states voted for Barack Obama for president. And again, if I add up all of these electoral votes, it gets to the number of 332. So under our system, if you have over 270 electoral votes, you become the next president of the United States. Yay! So in 2012, Barack Obama received 332 electoral votes over the 270, so he became the next president. We see sometimes the popular vote nationally being portrayed, but really that number doesn't mean anything. It's the popular vote in each individual state and who wins the majority in that particular state. So why do we have this system called the Electoral College? Well, at the time in 1787, when they were writing the Constitution, the Founding Fathers thought this sounded like a good idea and a compromise over the concern of creating a national campaign that they didn't foresee would be an ever possibility. It's been stuck around mainly because it's in the Constitution and it's just tradition. It's the way that we've always voted. But not everybody likes the Electoral College, and there have been calls for it to be changed. One big problem with this is something known as winner take all. No matter how close an election is in a state, in all but two of them, whoever wins the most votes wins all of those electoral votes. So states like California with 55 electors, even if the election is really close, 49 to 48%, the slimmest of margins, all of California's electoral votes will go to that winning candidate. And some people feel that's not fair, that just because the majority of the person who wins the majority of the votes gets all the electoral votes, it feels like maybe their vote doesn't necessarily get as counted on the official vote in the Electoral College. Now, Nebraska and Maine actually allow us to split our electoral votes, which happened in 2008. In 2008, John McCain was running as a Republican and Barack Obama was running as a Democrat. And in 2008, John McCain won the majority of votes in Nebraska. So he got 2 of Nebraska's 5 electoral votes for winning the statewide election. And then it looks at each of the congressional districts. And in the 1st and 3rd Nebraska congressional districts, again, John McCain won the majority of votes. So there's 2 more to John McCain's other 2, giving him 4 of Nebraska's 5 electoral votes. But in Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, Barack Obama won in a very close election, but won the majority of votes. And therefore, Obama got 1 of Nebraska's electoral votes, and John McCain got the other 4. Nebraska and Maine are the only 2 states that do this. All the other 48 states and the District of Columbia, they actually do not split their votes. It's a winner take all. Whoever gets all the majority, whoever gets the most votes in that state gets all of those electoral votes. Now, it's also mathematically possible to win the popular vote nationally, but still lose the election. This has happened 4 times in our nation's history. 1824 was the first time this happened, but the most recent occurrence of this was back in 2000 between George W. Bush and Al Gore. It was a really close election, and it boiled down to one state, Florida. And eventually, Florida's votes were decided to go to George W. Bush, giving George Bush 271 electoral votes, 1 over the 270 needed to win the Electoral College. But if you look at the popular vote nationally, Al Gore won more popular votes than George W. Bush. And this election is still very controversial today, which is why a lot of people point to the Electoral College and its flaws of winner take all, and that you can lose the election even if you win the popular vote nationally. Why does it stick around? Well, it's kind of hard to change the Constitution. It's possibly, and it's been done 27 times, but it's never been tried to change the Electoral College on how we vote for president in our nation's history. Some other reasons why people generally support the Electoral College is it does require regional support. It's possible if you look at an electoral map, even though you have some states typically generally always voting Democratic and some states typically always voting Republican, there's still ways that you can kind of take large areas of the country to get you to that 270. Otherwise, if it was just by popular vote, you would focus mostly on the large population centers, the East Coast and the West Coast, and the rest wouldn't probably make that big of a difference. Another reason why some people feel the Electoral College should stick around is something called the death or unsuitable candidate problem. Now, this has never happened, but it's possible that if a candidate dies before taking office, that this Electoral College, since these are real people, could possibly select a suitable replacement to replace that president. Now, this has never been done, and there definitely would be lawsuits and a constitutional crisis if this occurred. But some people would argue that if this would happen, the Electoral College could help us navigate through this problem of who would become the next president if the president-elect died before being sworn in. So that's kind of the quirky system that we call the Electoral College on how we vote for the American president. Make sure you check out the website, 270towin.com. It's a great resource to kind of look at how electoral politics in the presidential elections take place. Thank you for listening, and as always, if you have questions or need help, make sure you come talk to your teacher.